you could be looking at 100 tickets. One of them will have one bit that's slightly different, but because you're so burnt out, you just miss it.
I've also heard of horror stories and speaking no names, but I've actually heard of SOCs that are so bad in burnout, and you won't be able to believe this, yeah, actually deleted incidents and not triaging them at all.
Vaughan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Yak. Yes, hello everyone. Vaughan here, SOC leader at CloudGuard. I've been with CloudGuard now for just over 2 years. Joined CloudGuard as a senior SOC analyst from a company called Clarinet, where I was a professional level 2 SOC analyst. And then before that, spent 2.5 years at a company called Alert Logic, which is where I joined out of university doing a cybersecurity degree, and then worked my way up through CloudGuard from the senior SOC analyst into the SOC leader role, overseeing day-to-day operations of the SOC analyst team, and then recently also take ownership of our SOC engineering team. So in charge of both teams, overseeing the day-to-day operations and our automation approach being built for the SOC.
Amazing. So it's safe to say you know a lot when it comes to SOCs or security operations centers. Can you give us a brief explanation as to typically what a SOC is? What do they do? What is their function?
Yes, absolutely. So a SOC is used to provide oversight and assistance, depending on whether you're an internal SOC or a MSSP. You're going to be looking at the security incidents that generate for said environment. In the MSSP space, you're typically looking at multiple customer environments, and when security incidents generate from a SIEM that is used to ingest and normalize data,
Mhm.
when these alerts generate, they will get pushed over to our SOC analyst team that might be using either a ticketing system or the SIEM itself, and they'll conduct a triage, take a look at the incidents to determine whether it's malicious activity or benign activity, and in the case of an MSSP, escalating that over to an end customer.
Amazing. So um, typically you have a SIEM then, which ingests logs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that would raise alerts, and then the SOC's job is to deal with those alerts. Now, that's overly simplified. So let's talk a little bit about traditional versus automated SOC. And I think it's good to start with a traditional SOC. How does a traditional SOC operate? And what are the typical sort of challenges that you see in a traditional SOC?
Yeah, great question. Spending time as a SOC analyst myself, I've very much been in the weeds, earned my stripes in the fire of those traditional SOC analyst roles. One of the most common things that gets spoken about all the time is analyst burnout, and it's because it's a very real thing in the traditional SOC environment. Before any forms of automation were implemented or looked to get implemented, you're dealing with ticket after ticket after ticket that can be the same type of ticket. Maybe the tuning you have is minimal, or there's a reason that this incident is generating because of false positive criteria in the analytical rule. These tickets are generating, and as an analyst, you need to work them to make sure that they're not a threat. Maybe there is a case where they can't be tuned out, and this repetition of the same thing over and over and over again leads you into a particular mindset where you are almost growing to, in a case, blind. I would say. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Yak. You're growing blind to the data that you're observing, and needing to have that mentality of always on, and always trying to problem solve and look below the logs, so to say. You're always trying to look for the pattern recognition in the logs. Okay, yes, this is a sign-in event, but do the entities inside it indicate something larger is at play? When you're always in that mindset of trying to deduce, is there more, it can be quite mentally taxing. And when you're dealing with these large volumes of incidents, and the repetition of incidents can lead into some pretty severe burnout that is really strife throughout the SOC analyst world.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that. So, in my experience as a SOC analyst, there was always a case of all these incidents coming in. You have to look at every alert that comes in with the same level of scrutiny. Problem is, you'd get so one sort of alert triggered for multiple customers, and then you're looking at these, and you kind of almost become blind to the really nitty gritty details that you need to look at. you could be looking at 100 tickets. One of them will have one bit that's slightly different, but because you're so burnt out, you just miss it, or the chances of missing it are so high. And on top of that, you've got all your queues and you're dealing with these incidents, and then you need to do tuning, but then there's no time to do tuning, and then you need to do other things like threat hunting and looking at new use cases, and you're focusing so much on that queue just to make sure that you can get through all of those security incidents. You don't get time to do all the other stuff, and then it just kind of, it's like a domino effect, isn't it? It just keeps building up after that.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Um,
What's one incident, Yak, that you remember from your time as a SOC analyst that was a burnout inducer?
this is one where I really wished we could have, um, well, where I know for a fact automation would really helped. This was the Log4j vulnerability that
Mhm.
came out. If you remember that one, I think
Yes,
it
I
was
do.
December a couple of years
Yes.
ago.
Yeah.
And boy, if you want to know the definition of burnout, yeah, you want to sit inside of a SOC when Log4j was heavily exploited. So it was a simple exploit, and what we saw was basically adversaries setting up bots left, right, and center, automating attacks, and you'd see hundreds and hundreds of alerts an hour in your queue, just Log4j potential, Log4j potential, Log4j, just one after the other. And although it was very simple, the things that you were looking out for, I think it was just, was there a reverse connection? Was there information going back? Yes or no? It was quite simple to figure out. But the fact that you had to do that repeatedly for every single incident that came in, and you just get tempted to say, oh, I've seen this alert for this customer 100 times already. Surely it can't be the case. And it's just there. Like, it very easy to assume that customer, same alert, must be a waste of time. We'll just close it off. That one in particular, if we had automation capabilities where I was when this occurred, that would have been a massive help.
Hmm. I've also heard of horror stories and speaking no names, but I've actually heard of socks that are so bad in burnout, and you won't be able to believe this. Yeah, actually deleted incidents and not triaging them at all.
Wow.
I know, I know. I've heard some serious horror stories,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I think that just goes to show that the level that the burnout can induce on a sock when
Yeah.
you're in this more traditional environment.
Absolutely. I mean, the pressure's there. You've got all of these incidents to get through. You've got your SLAs to meet. How do you do it?
Mm.
And so the answer to that is, well, at least part of the answer to that is automation, right? So, in your experience, how do you see SecOps changing, or SOCs changing, when they have automation helping them out?
Hmm. Great question. When I left Clarinet to come over to CloudGuard, one of the reasons I wanted to do that was because of our automation drive and our automate everything mentality. I was at the time of being at my last company and moving over to CloudGuard, still an analyst, and I was in the weeds and experiencing that burnout and the thought of seeing this alert that is generating over and over and over again and knowing the exact steps that need to be done in order to automate this, however, needing to place myself there to manually do it myself,
Mm,
it was causing me to essentially rip my hair out. And having that automation functionality and the potential that this could be automated was one of the things that made me think, yeah, this absolutely needs to be done.
yeah. Um, so when it comes to automation, um, there's obviously a lot of things that can be automated in many different ways, right? Um, in your experience, what would be the best approach to automating? We're talking about, how do you identify that this is something that we could automate, or by doing X, Y, and Z, it's going to bring us so much value, it's going to save us so much time, or it is going to aid our analysts so much. What are the kinds of things that you're looking for there?
I mean, we have this conversation all the time, Yak, about metrics, and metrics really are the baseline of how you make decisions on this sort of stuff. There's no point automating something that's going to have minimal impact on the outcome. Is having the metrics that support the hypothesis that you're going to make more efficient and reduce the time of. And one thing that we're really big on in CloudGuard is our MTTA, or mean time to acknowledge, and
Mm,
MTTI, or mean time to investigate. We really knuckle in on the incidents explicitly that have large MTTI. So the ones that analysts are spending the most time to triage and approving most difficult, they're going to be the ones that are ripe for automation because they're going to have the biggest impact on the overall resolution and triage time for not only our analysts, but for our customers as well. So customers want to be notified in a timely manner. If there's an incident that's taken 20, 30 minutes to triage alone, if we can implement automation functionality to help speed up the enrichment or help speed up the decision making process, that's going to not only reduce the time it takes for a customer to receive the notification if required, but
Mm.
also reduce the amount of effort an analyst is going to have to put in and time spent from an analyst to do the OSINT and the enrichment themselves, reducing the amount of this medial go to a website, plug in an IP address, get the score, bring it back,
Yeah.
which is also ultimately going to help reduce the amount of burnout against the analyst.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you that that is a very good way of going about it. If you're looking at your metrics, you've got hard data to say these things are taking X amount of time. And so these are our highest offenders, for example, and we should maybe look at automating that or parts of that to bring value and bring time back to the SOC. It's interesting because you come from the SOC world, um, and so your lens on it is very different to my approach, but we make it work together because often my approach, and this is more in terms of general automation, right? So not just the SOC, but automating everywhere. It is what are those tasks that are common across different things that you are doing, and by hitting those, what you can do is you can automate one thing. So let's say, for example, enrichment, which is something you touched on. Enrichment happens on every single incident, or most incidents anyway. So what is enrichment? It is you've got your incident, you've got these IOCs, indicators of compromise. These are bits of information that you can dial in on and check are they good or bad. An IP address, a domain, maybe even a user. And these are things that a SOC would always check. And so my lens on it is slightly different. It is this is something that is done across every single incident. And so if we were to automate that, that is going to save um, X amount of time across every single incident. But then when you pair that with metrics, that message becomes so much more powerful because you could be missing out on the fact that there is one incident that takes up a lot of time and it's fairly frequent. And when you add it up, it amounts to like 20 hours a month or something. Um, and so we should look at automating that. So no, that's amazing. Yeah,
Mm.
get metrics in and really use those to figure out what steps need automating.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when it comes to automation, it's very easy to fall into this trap of I want to automate something in its entirety, right? You've identified something, you've identified an incident that is taking up a lot of time over a period of time. And so it's very easy to fall into the trap of how do I automate this so that incident comes in, is fully automated and is done, right? And I think it's key to point out that when it comes to automation, don't think of it as a replacement for your investigations. Think of it as an aid. It is there as a tool to help alleviate the stress, right? Um, and for some incidents, which are fairly simple, the investigation steps and fixed outcomes and things like that, it's pretty easy to actually automate end to end. But there'll be some incidents which are complex and take time for a reason because they need a human to look into that incident, right? You still need to apply that human logic, and some decisions need to be made, as in, it might be that you see some activity, but actually that's fairly normal for that particular user based on the role that they do. So one example I like to bring up is when a user is logging on to patch their servers, for example, and that happens once a month. But from a security perspective, that's going to look a bit dodgy, right? No one's logging into this damn server, and then all of a sudden, someone's logged into it with admin privileges, and things are happening, like services are shutting down. Like, what is going on here? And so, for things like that, it's important to know that automation is a tool, um, and it's an aid for the analyst. You don't have to end-to-end automate something, right? One of the things we can do is make sense of the data and present it to the analyst in a way that is helpful to them. So rather than go in and say, right, I've done my investigation, here's what I found, or based on that X, Y, and Z, this is a decision, and here's what we're going to do. It could just be a fact of, I'm going to go in, I'm going to make sense of all of the information and present it to the analyst. And I've now saved the analyst 5 minutes of their time by doing all of that for them. What's your experience of using automation in this way? So rather than having it done end to end, it is more particular functions within an investigation are taken over by automation um, as a tool to aid your analysts.
This is a really great question. I'm pondering because it leads back into this whole burnout element that we was indicating earlier, right? Having the repetition be removed, it also enriches the investigation in another way, in a sense that the way we position our Ansel automation is we're using it as its own analyst. So with Ansel doing part of the automation, say the more repetitive standard triage methods, another way that I see the analysis going is when an analyst comes in and does the other half of the analysis, or the other side of the analysis, you're almost getting two analysts worth of analysis done on an incident. So instead of having it end to end automated, you're actually able to kind of leverage two analysts worth of analysis. And what do I mean by that? If the automation is running, your standard reputation checks, pulling back confidence scores, information that would be able to make a decision, an analyst can then come in and use their own judgment. And this comes back to your point, Yak, around automation isn't here to replace the analyst, right? It's here to make the analyst better. Rather than the analyst spending time to retrieve that layer one information, I'll call it, they're technically doing tier two type triage where they've already have a nice package of information, and they can make new triage decisions off the back of that information to then take the triage to the next level. So instead of a customer coming back after the tier one triage and saying, this is we're not sure about this, for example, and then needing to go and conduct these searches anyway, you're almost able to do it sooner in the ticket's life cycle,
Mm.
which allows you to have a more robust, thorough analysis faster, which is kind of the way I see it. And being able to do that will lead to more rich, in-depth incident triage, which the customer is only going to benefit from on the other side, because maybe they get less escalations, maybe they have more thorough escalations, just leading to an overall better customer experience.
That's a really good point. Um, just imagine for every single incident that's automated, you've got two analysts working on it. It's not just the one analyst picking it off the queue and doing the investigation. No, an automated analyst has already done a lot of the work for you. It's already presenting to you. I think that plays really well because when you log on first thing in the morning as a SOC analyst, you look at your queue. Most days it's fine. Some days there's a lot in there. And it would be so nice to open up your incident and see someone or something has already done part of the investigation for you and presented the information back, and you're confident in its capability, where you just pick it up and continue the investigation. You've already saved so many minutes per investigation there. That is
Mm.
really powerful. So talking a little bit further then, automation's helping efficiencies and with investigations and really cutting time down when it comes to time to triage and time to investigate and time to respond, right? Um, but what that means is the analysts now have time to do other things, right? So let's pick one example. For example, let's say threat hunting. Threat hunting is really important because uh, it will help us identify things that we don't have rules set up for, something that's new, something that's just been discovered, right? Um, do you want to tell us a little bit about threat hunting and how we use or how we can use automation to improve on that and provide a more quality service?
Yeah, absolutely. First, going back to the time saved by automation, you'll probably remember, Yak, when I first joined the company, we had the meetup in Birmingham, and one of the conversations I put forward was, if I was a customer and we at CloudGuard were promoting all of this automation, is saving all this time, as a customer, I would be asking CloudGuard, okay, you have all this automation to help me, but what does that actually mean for me? Obviously, lower response times, but what are you guys now doing with all that free time? And that's where this conversation around these more higher level tasks and higher security importance tasks come in around, can you do more threat hunting, more use case creation, more infrastructure based security recommendations. So that is what the automation also allows for our analysts to do more of, that then gives our customers a more rich experience, because the more medial incident analysis that is done, analysts can now spend more time doing the higher complexity tasks like threat hunting, for example. And then, yeah, because with our automated threat hunting project, when you start layering more automation capabilities on the top of our standard higher complexity processes again, you just have an order of magnitude, almost exponential growth in terms of the efficiency and output that an analyst can actually provide, right? So yeah, having that automation around threat hunting, which we do, not only allows for more lateral searches to be done, but also more vertical searches in terms of the impact that a customer is seeing. So yeah, the automation can not only benefit in the incident triage element, but can also benefit in the threat hunting element as well, and practically any other process. But yeah, it's important to mention, as you said, yeah, it's not again meant to be a replacement for the analyst, but give the analysts superpowers essentially in terms of being more efficient and more capable.
Yeah. Let me lean in with a bit of my experience and with threat hunting. Oh boy. So I used to do threat hunting. Typically what it is, you come up with a query. So something's happened out there. There's a new exploit, or there's a buzz going around about a specific vulnerability, and you want to know if your customers have this particular exploit being exploited, have this thing being exploited, or this vulnerability present. And so what you'd have to do is you'd have to get this query that you put together, and then you would have to run it painstakingly across every single one of your customers. As an MSSP, that is incredibly time consuming. And again, burnout happens there as well, because then you run your hunts, and most of the time there's nothing there. And then when there is something there, you've got to create an incident for it, and then you've got to work with the customer to help remediate that thing. Well, if there's an incident off the back of it, then you've got to investigate it. Kind of snowballs. Um, and what we have here now is we come up with a query. Um, that is actually, we can talk a little bit about how Ansel helps us create these queries as well, or at least identify potential things that we should be hunting for real time. But we essentially come up with these queries, and we have a tool where we put the query in, and immediately within seconds, every single customer is hunted. And within seconds, you've got a nice result back of, right, I've done all these customers, none of these have. There's some hits on these ones. I've already created incidents for you. Here's the incidents. Please go ahead and take a look at them. And so, what used to take at least like an hour or two, just in terms of hunting for one thing across every single customer, has turned into, well, within 5 minutes, all of that's done. Not only that, we've created work packages for those to be investigated further by an analyst as well. And that is really something. And I think we've already started looking at other stuff, right? Because there's limitations when it comes to threat hunting. There's a
Mm.
human involved. It takes a lot of time. How often can you do it? Not very. It becomes very difficult when it's manual, right? But when it's automated, um, actually it happens so quick, and so much of the process is already done for you that maybe we could run this once a day. Maybe it can carry on running over the weekend as well. Who knows? The possibilities are endless there.
And there's also the human element of needing to source the queries and the threat intelligence as well, right? You can obviously get TI feeds that give you this sort of information, which leads in nicely with the automation kind of package. But in your more traditional SOC, the threat hunting there is, an analyst will go out, they'll read some articles, they'll look for some relevant TI, then they'll build the query, then they'll conduct the hunt on one, two, three, four, five, up to however many customers. But then again, once you start looping in the automation of an automated SOC, you can automate various parts of the process. Maybe it's the TI gathering, maybe it's the TI gathering and a potential KQL adaptation for said hunts. Maybe you can generate multiple based on the articles that it's running. Then an analyst may test and finalize that query. Then when you plug it into the hunting element itself, you're starting to get a really efficient process that speeds up and can really make an impact on your customers.
Yeah. I mean, I love to go back to Log4j on this one. So Log4j happened very quickly overnight. Um, I'd say because of the gravitas of it, it was CV'd pretty quickly and distributed. And I believe the model we have at the moment would have picked that up anyway. But even in cases where we don't have that ingestion model or the model that identifies new threats, what happened with Log4j, if you remember, every single customer, am I affected? I need to know as soon as possible. Which assets are affected? What do I need to do? Right. And again, that was a lot of effort. So not only are the analysts going through this massive queue of Log4j incidents, they've also got customers asking them, am I affected by this? And we are obliged to tell them yes or no. But that in and of itself takes effort to go and look for those vulnerabilities and collate the information and then go back to the customer saying, yes or no, you're not affected. With hunting like this, it becomes very simple, doesn't it? Because you run that across every single customer and very quickly you can come up with an output, something along the lines of, no customer, actually, you're not affected. You seem to be good. Yes, you are affected, but it's not, there's not been a successful exploit. Here's what you need to do to protect yourself. Or it looks like there's an exploit there as well. And so we can actually prioritize that work and also work with the customer faster to fix um, the exploit in and of itself and any fallout from it as well. And so it also it's like an endless circle, isn't it? Because all of these additional tasks that we do as a SOC, the purpose of it is to provide more value to the customer, but also has a side effect of it makes the customer more secure. It's almost like by doing these additional tasks, you are actually improving the security of the customer, thereby reducing the number of vulnerabilities or the methods by which they can be attacked with in the first place. Um, and by leveraging automation as a tool, you're just speeding that cycle up. You just get there so much quicker.
Hmm. And it's probably, honestly, yeah, it's probably worth patting ourselves on the back a little bit in terms of the solution that we created for Sentinel and Defender as well, right? It's no secret that cross workspace queries and other SIEM solutions are possible. I've used Alien Vault, for example, in the past, where
Mm,
you can query multiple customer environments at once. But when I first joined us here at CloudGuard, one of the things the SOC analyst said to me is hunting in Sentinel and hunting in Defender is such a chore because Defender explicitly you need to authenticate into a customer's environment, then manually run the query. And then Sentinel, for example, you can create these cross workspace queries, but then every time you get a new customer and you need to go and update said query, and then you need to change the tables that it's executing against. So yeah, this custom designed automated threat that we hunting that we've built is actually kind of customer agnostic, and it can run against all Defender and Sentinel environments in tandem, really, and really removes the constraints of that Sentinel and Defender does have.
yeah. I actually want to talk a little bit more on that. So, when it comes to automation, is it simple? Sometimes yes, a lot of the times no. Um, but it's interesting because you get a lot of challenges, especially when you try to start doing hunting inside of Defender. But it is so worth it at the end of it all. These are challenges. I mean, you learn from, but the value that it brings back, even if it took us, and it didn't really take us that long, but even if it took us months to build this whole automated threat hunting platform, it would absolutely be worth it because of the time saved, the value that we bring back to our customers, the constant security that it brings as well. It is absolutely worth it. Um, so I'd add that. Um,
Yeah. And even just lead into that, like because we have the functionality there now to cross search customer environments with a KQL query, Defender or Sentinel, I'm actually seeing the SOC guys use it for things other than automated threat hunting, which is probably actually a conversation we need to catch up about later after the pod yak. But they're now using this functionality for other methods as well, which is really interesting to see how you can kind of come up with one solution and it evolves into something new, and the automation kind of takes on new forms to be better.
That's amazing. So yeah, we have this great tool for automated threat hunting, but because it's been built in such a flexible way, so analysts have found another use case for it, and they are able to use it in those ways and just improve their workflows even further. That is pretty cool. Um, Last one then to close off. Um, we talk a lot about burnout, and I'm sure a lot of people talk about burnout when it comes to SOC. Um, here's a question for you: is that something that you faced at CloudGuard, at least since we've really matured and gone big on our automation strategy, or do you find that sometimes it's still there, but it is been alleviated to a considerable level?
Moving into the SOC leader role, I'll give the SOC guys credit. They're the ones that are doing the groundwork now.
Mm,
But the feedback that they've given me is it's definitely alleviated. It's not solved. I don't think burnout will ever be solved.
mm,
I think it just kind of takes new forms. So the incident triage element has kind of alleviated a bit now, but maybe there's a different element of burnout coming in with like maybe new automation submissions or something, or the number of threat hunts that now need to be done because of all this freed up time. I do think that, you know, in 1 year's time, a element of burnout will still be there, and I think the same in 10 years time as well. But in terms of the incident triage and the overall ticket element of burnout, I do think that we're trending in the right direction for that one. What do you think?
yeah, completely agree. It's a bit of a double edged sword, isn't it? Because um, we provide such a well automated service that we're actually feeling the pain elsewhere now. Actually, we're able to do all this stuff. We should be doing it better. Um, I like to think we focus a lot of our efforts on improvement as well. So yeah, it's automated, but that's not it. How can we improve this? Or now that this is automated, or we have these tools to just do things quicker, you start identifying other things, other areas that can be improved. I love your example of they've started using this tool elsewhere, and so immediately we're thinking, how can we bring more value in those other areas, or what other areas are we missing out on now that we could help introduce efficiencies in? It's quite
And
cool. Yeah.
I'm working from a position of, you know, having the SOC team as direct, being the manager for the SOC team and trying to make sure that their burnout is minimized
Mm,
and ensuring their happiness and contentment with work. I truly do see, you know, burnout is always seen as this bad thing, but it can also be kind of a canary in a coal mine as well for innovation. If the guys are saying, you know, I'm really sick of seeing, you know, said process, or oh my god, I really don't want to have to do this again. Wow, another one, but not from an incident perspective. Maybe it's reporting, or like I said, maybe it's threat hunting, or maybe it's something else. When you can have open dialogue about burnout, which is something we really do try and cultivate,
mhm.
that can be a great leading indicator that, you know, this is now a candidate for automation because we're so open with how the workflow is impacting us as people.
That's a really good point because we've solved of I guess we've solved the problem of burnout within the SOC when it comes to your typical manual functions, right? As your queues and the incidents and the investigations and stuff. But this is now helping because we're feeding the pain in other areas, which probably always felt, but because the burnout element of a traditional SOC is so high, it just never gets discussed.
Hmm.
And so we've got the ability to discuss these things, and we've actually got the time to go and address these as well. Maybe it's maybe yeah, we could probably discuss that on another podcast because there's a whole other element to automation when it comes to automating processes in general, right? So processes around the business itself. You know, we're talking about onboarding, we're talking about reporting, you know, creating customer reports, for example. That is in and of itself a pretty hefty task.
Mhm.
And I know we've taken some huge steps to make that a lot easier, and we're going to continue to do so. But it's only because of these efforts that the SOC has time to actually come and tell us we've got these challenges. We can improve in these areas. We can do better over here.
And to kind of bring it full circle, that's one of the upsides and benefits of having an automated SOC, right? Having the freedom to go and chat about these problems and build this compared to a traditional SOC allows you to have all the benefits off the back of it, like exactly what we're talking about.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into today's episode, and a big thanks to Vaughan for sharing his insights. Until next time. That's it. I'm not doing that again. No, no, I can't.